A gymnast depends completely on her ability to keep her balance throughout her performance. She continually monitors herself to remain stable. Though she may not be conscious of it, her body must also keep its own stability, internal stability, or homeostasis. To maintain homeostasis, she depends on her nervous system, and she depends on her endocrine system. The endocrine system permits the body to live in a world of constant change. It also brings change to the body. It is important for movement, for growth, for reproduction, and for adaptation, every aspect of life. The basic units of this system are special kinds of glands. Unlike other glands, endocrine glands secrete their products, called hormones, directly into the bloodstream. The powerful hormones travel everywhere in the body, influencing every aspect of life in very specific ways. Many parts of the body secrete hormones, but 6 major types of glands are of particular importance to adults. They are the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, the thyroid and parathyroids, the adrenals, the gonads, and in the head, the pituitary. Every major endocrine gland is a highly structured organ. Throughout each run the smallest blood vessels, capillaries. Hormones are secreted into the capillaries. Through a microscope, it is possible to see red blood cells as they move through the capillaries and veins. Hormones, however, are not actually visible. They are in solution in the blood plasma, just as salt is in solution in seawater and is invisible. The hormones enter the general circulation. Eventually, they filter back to the capillaries elsewhere in the body. Unlike the red blood cells, hormones travel freely through the capillary walls. Though they travel everywhere in the body, hormones only influence specific target cells. A hormone may have relatively few targets, affecting only a few kinds of cells. A different hormone may affect nearly every cell in the body. Every target cell has a chemical receptor, which the hormone specifically fits, as a key specifically fits a lock. The receptor may be on the surface of the cell or inside it. A cell that is not a target for a particular hormone has no receptors for it and is not affected by it. The gymnast strictly controls her actions to keep her balance. The endocrine system strictly controls its secretions through a principle known as feedback. The principle of feedback keeps our buildings comfortably heated. On this thermostat, the red needle tells the actual temperature of the room. Using the black needle, we select the temperature we desire. The thermostat acts as a switch to turn the furnace on. The heat is fed back to the thermostat. When the desired temperature is met, the thermostat turns the furnace off. When the room cools, the thermostat responds automatically and turns the furnace on again. The building stays at a fairly constant temperature. The thermostat responds to the amount of heat in a building. Most endocrine glands respond to the level of a specific substance in the blood, either a chemical regulated by the gland or a different gland's hormone. For example, let's say that the level of a chemical in the blood begins to rise, threatening to upset the internal balance of the body. A gland that regulates that chemical is stimulated to secrete its hormones. In this example, the hormones would act to lower the amount of chemical in the blood until the level is correct. The gland is no longer stimulated, and it slows its secretions. A delicate balance is maintained. Now let's look at some of the important functions of the 6 major endocrine glands. The pancreas is part of the digestive system. It produces digestive juices that flow into the intestine. But throughout the pancreas are speckled over 1 million small distinct islets of endocrine cells, the islets of Langerhans, named after the scientist who first noted them. The islets of Langerhans produce 2 hormones, glucagon and the vitally important insulin. If we lost the ability to produce insulin, our bodies would fail. We would lose weight and lose vast amounts of water through the kidneys. We would become dehydrated, racked by insatiable thirst. Soon we would enter coma, and then we would die. The reason? Without insulin, many parts of the body could not use their most important fuel, the sugar glucose. Until glucose can enter a cell, it can't be used. Insulin allows many cells to use glucose. When insulin binds to a cell receptor, the cell wall somehow changes. Glucose enters. Some cells oxidize the sugar for energy. Other cells store the glucose. For example, fat cells convert the sugar to fat. Liver cells change glucose to yet another form called glycogen. The islets of Langerhans produce another hormone, glucagon, that helps to retrieve this form of stored glucose when the body needs energy. The secretion of insulin is regulated by glucose. Through the digestive system, our bodies absorb the sugar when we eat. First, glucose enters the bloodstream. The islets of Langerhans sense the higher level and secrete more insulin. The sugar can then enter cells of the body. As the blood sugar level decreases, the production of insulin also decreases. If, in the course of the day, the sugar level falls too low, glucose is retrieved from storage by the second hormone of the islets of Langerhans, glucagon. A person who loses the ability to produce enough insulin has the disease diabetes mellitus. Fortunately, victims of this disease can be effectively treated. Treatment may range from strict regulation of diet to daily injection of insulin and diet regulation. Brian Hughes has had diabetes mellitus for years. Under the supervision of his doctors, he has learned to regulate his own diet and to give himself daily injection of insulin. In the future, perhaps, Brian may have an automatically controlled supply of insulin surgically implanted in his body, freeing him from these daily injections. Until then, to live normally, his health, his life depend on strict adherence to his schedule. Another gland important to the body's use of energy is the thyroid, which rests like an open butterfly in the neck. Its hormones increase the rate of the body's metabolism. Too much thyroid hormone, and we become thin, nervous, jittery. Too little, we gain weight and feel sluggish. When we are cold, the thyroid secretion is raised. The rate of metabolism therefore increases, creating more body heat. The thyroid needs iodine, an essential part of its hormones. In many parts of the world, iodine is readily available in the diet. But in areas where iodine is deficient, goiter can occur. Goiter is an enlargement of the thyroid gland that was once a common sight in many parts of the world where iodine is deficient. Goiter is prevented now by the addition of iodine to table salt. In the 1800s, before iodine was recognized as important, attempts were made to remove goiter surgically, an operation that cost some patients their lives, because the doctors unknowingly removed with the thyroid another kind of endocrine gland. Embedded in the thyroid are 4 smaller glands, the parathyroids. The parathyroids regulate an extremely low and extremely important level of calcium in the blood. This small but constant amount of blood calcium is directly or indirectly involved with the normal functioning of every cell in the body. Most of the body's calcium, about 99%, lies in the bones and teeth. It may be easy to believe that the skeleton is just a lifeless, rock-like foundation for the body. In truth, bones are dynamic living tissue, continually nourished, continually changing. The bones serve as a storage depot for calcium, and they are the target for the parathyroid hormones. The hormones stimulate cells that dissolve bone mineral, liberating calcium into the blood. When the blood level of calcium is low, the parathyroids increase their secretion, thus raising the amount of calcium in the blood. When the correct level is met, the glands slow their secretion. Through this feedback, a very constant level of blood calcium is maintained. The adrenal glands are perched like two caps, one on each kidney. They are extremely complex and still largely unknown, and yet one of their hormones, commonly called adrenaline, is perhaps the best known of all hormones. Most people know stories about adrenaline. We usually associate it with extreme emergencies. It seems to endow us with superhuman strength. The term adrenaline, which implies that it is the only hormone of the adrenal glands, is misleading. The truth is that the adrenals produce several kinds of hormones. Each adrenal is really two glands in one. The central part is called the adrenal medulla. The medulla secretes what we commonly call adrenaline, really two hormones more properly called epinephrine and norepinephrine. Unlike other endocrine glands, the adrenal medullae are stimulated primarily by the nervous system, and not only in emergencies, but at all times of excitement. For example, when we must perform a frightening task. Within seconds after secretion, the heart beats faster and more forcibly. Blood pressure increases. Vessels to the skin and intestines are constricted to conserve energy and presumably to reduce bleeding from possible injuries. Vessels to the brain and skeletal muscles are dilated for alertness and strength. The liver releases stored glucose for a burst of energy. The body is ready for action. Surrounding the medulla is the adrenal cortex, the second part of each adrenal gland. The cortex is still largely unknown. We do know that it produces two very important kinds of hormones. One hormone called aldosterone acts on the kidney to conserve salt and therefore water. For example, it is secreted when we sweat. Cortisol, another important hormone of the cortex, is concerned with food metabolism, and it helps us recover from illness or injury. In 1855, before any function of the adrenal glands was known, a physician named Thomas Addison described a disease in which the adrenal glands were impaired. These pictures come from his original description of the disease. Each of the patients complained of a gradual and unexplainable weakening of the body. Each of them died mysteriously after what seemed to be a relatively minor illness. Today, victims of Addison's disease are treated with replacement hormones. John F. Kennedy had Addison's disease. Without sex hormones, there would be no human race, for without them, we could not become mature adults. An artist consciously decides what his finished work will look like. His hands carry his idea to the canvas. For the most part, our genes determine what we will look like as mature adults. But it is our sex hormones that carry what might be called the gene's idea to adulthood. Each of the male's testes produces testosterone, essentially beginning in the teen years. Under testosterone's influence, the genitals grow and become mature. Sperm is produced. Masculine hair and contours grow. Testosterone also causes the voice to deepen. Boy becomes man. In women, each of the ovaries produces sex hormones. The hormones are more numerous and with more complex actions than in men. Under the action of estrogen, genitals develop, breasts grow, feminine contours are built. The menstrual cycle occurs, and mature egg cells, or ova, are released. Estrogen and another sex hormone, progesterone, play vital roles in childbearing, helping to maintain and regulate pregnancy. Sex hormones in women and men, some hormones of the adrenal cortex, and the thyroid hormones are all regulated by a so-called master gland, the pituitary. The pituitary is a potent pea-sized gland that rests in a cradle of bone at the base of the brain. Just above this master gland is its own master, a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Some of the pituitary's hormones control other endocrine glands, the thyroid, for example. The body strives to maintain a constant level of thyroid hormone in the blood. The hypothalamus secretes a hormone that travels directly to the pituitary. The pituitary reacts by producing its own hormone. That hormone stimulates the thyroid to secrete its hormones. The level of thyroid hormone feeds back to the pituitary and hypothalamus. They respond by adjusting their secretions to maintain a constant level of thyroid hormone in the blood. Through similar feedback mechanisms, the pituitary and hypothalamus control the adrenal cortex's cortisol. The gonads are regulated by two hormones of the pituitary. One controls the sex hormones, the other controls the development of sperm in men, and in women, it controls the development of the ova. The pituitary also secretes hormones important to the conservation of water by the body, several hormones important to different aspects of childbearing, and it secretes growth hormone. Growth hormone, as the name implies, stimulates growth during childhood and adolescence. It is probably important throughout our lives, even after growth has stopped, because it participates in food metabolism. All told, this little gland secretes 7 hormones important to both sexes. It is justifiably called the master gland. All the endocrine glands secrete hormones into the blood. The hormones travel everywhere, affecting and controlling many processes essential to life. The principle of feedback controls many of the glands. In turn, the glands contribute to reproduction, growth, metabolism, and the maintenance of homeostasis. Together, the endocrine glands comprise a system of control vital to human life.